The greatest Haki blooms happen in battle. That is what we were told by Rayleigh. And there is not a single character in One Piece who better epitomizes this concept than Zoro. That's right, whereas Zoro may not yet have the same level of Haki mastery as Luffy just yet, in this particular regard of having one's Haki bloom in the heat of combat, Zoro is inarguably the single most talented character we have seen in the story, surpassing even his captain. In fact, Zoro's knack for being able to awaken new branches of Haki in battle is actually underrated by most readers, as many of Zoro's major Haki milestones have historically gone overlooked at the time that they occurred, due to the fact that we didn't even understand what he was doing till decades down the line. This has resulted in many moments that we can retroactively recognize as shockingly early demonstrations of Haki by Zoro that simply flew under the radar when they originally took place. So whereas it may seem like Zoro is still not yet at the level of top tier Haki users, the three most important things that I'm going to be breaking down are that first of all, Zoro's ability to have Haki blooms is unrivaled and gives him an extremely fast path of growth to top tier. Second, as it stands, Zoro is already a far more impressive Haki user than most realize. And finally, and most importantly, there is one specific usage of Haki that Zoro seems to possess that may be completely unique to him, something that no other character may be able to do, a technique that seems to be setting up Zoro to become one of the strongest Haki users to ever live by the end of the story. But first, I wanted to let you know that you are spending way too much money on your VPN. Most VPNs, including yours, cost about $13 to $15 a month. But right now, Surfshark VPN, the sponsor for this video, is offering an amazing deal for less than $3 a month for my viewers. That's right, Surfshark is a top brand, world-class, award-winning VPN, and it's offering a deal for literally less than $3 a month right now for my viewers who sign up today. And you get a 30-day money-back guarantee, so you can basically try it out for free. And if you sign up now, you get an additional 4 months free. So why are you blowing so much money on your VPN when you could basically be using Surfshark for a couple bucks a month? And in case you're one of the few people living under a rock who is not already using a VPN, the reason everyone else uses a VPN is because VPNs allow you to virtually swap locations to anywhere on the globe. You can play in game servers in Asia. You can stream sports for free from Europe. You can get access to anime that's streaming for free only on Netflix in Japan. If you're not using a VPN, then you're behind. And if you are using a VPN, you're wasting way too much money on it. Just switch to Surfshark while their deal for less than $3 a month is going. So get your Surfshark deal today. Just enter coupon code MORGE for up to an extra 4 months free at surfshark.deal/Morge. Link in the description below, or just scan the QR code. So that aside, to begin with, one of the most extraordinary things about Zoro is that he has actually been tapping into advanced applications of Haki shockingly early, literally since pre-Timeskip. Before we get any further, I need to make a quick disclaimer that Zoro getting Haki blooms frequently, and even earlier than Luffy, does not mean that I'm saying Zoro is overall better at Haki than Luffy. It's not about how fast you awaken Haki. I mean, Doflamingo as a child had already unlocked Conqueror's Haki way earlier than Luffy or Zoro, and they have both become far better at Haki than Doflamingo already. Ceiling is what matters, not speed. And Luffy likely has the highest Haki ceiling of any character, but that doesn't change the fact that Zoro was accidentally tapping into Haki much earlier than Luffy. This can be seen very clearly in both the Mr. 1 and Kaku fights. Beginning with Mr. 1, what is made clear in this battle is that the secret to cutting steel has nothing to do with pure brute strength. All of Zoro's physical force is irrelevant against Mr. 1. Rather, there is a very, very specific Zen-like state that Zoro had to achieve, wherein his blade could easily cut through steel while simultaneously not even scratching a sheet of paper. While we didn't know it at the time, hundreds of chapters later, it was pretty blatantly spelled out for us that yes, this was Zoro using Haki. The description of what Zoro is trying to achieve in this fight, a blade that can cut steel while simultaneously not cutting paper, is word for word the exact description that we were given in Wano when Hyogoro explains what the ability of Ryo, or Advanced Armament Haki, is. This shouldn't really be a point of contention. Oda literally could not possibly be more explicit in his phrasing to spell out that Zoro used Haki to cut Mr. 1 back in Alabasta. That's also why that scene was written to be so mysterious. Zoro himself didn't understand what was happening in this moment, he just knew that it was a strange, special sort of power. And later on, he was trying to figure out how to use that power again. On top of that, even just the concept of what Zoro learned to cut Mr. 1 revolves around the idea of will, a swordsman utilizing his will to cut exactly what he wants and not what he doesn't want. That control over one's will was the focus of of the Mr. One fight, because of course Haki, as we later learn, is literally one's will manifested. Now I think some readers push back against the idea that Zoro was using advanced armament Haki as early as Alabasta. Some say it's just armament Haki. But no, Hyogoro's explanation of cutting steel while not cutting paper is specifically referring to the advanced application of armament Haki where it flows out of you, Ryo. I understand that this may seem weird to readers that Zoro accidentally used advanced armament without even knowing basic armament in the first place, but ultimately it doesn't matter if it feels weird, all that matters is what the text is implying, and the reality is that the author is pretty much straight up spoon-feeding us word for word as explicitly as possible that what Zoro did in Alabasta was Ryo. Advanced armament Haki. Sure, personally I agree it's kind of crazy that Zoro skipped armament and used advanced armament, but I view that more so as Oda being kind of haphazard with how he writes Haki in general. I mean, Yamato didn't even know how to do second level advanced armament Haki to free herself from the cuffs, but then she was still able to unlock advanced Conqueror's Haki afterwards anyway, despite the fact that it was implied that you need to learn both levels of advanced armament before then being able to achieve advanced Conquerors, so at the end of the day it seems like the steps don't actually matter and you can just unlock certain abilities whenever. All that really matters is that Oda is spelling out that what Hyogoro is trying to teach Luffy, which is Ryo, aka Advanced Armament Haki, is identical to what Zoro used in Alabasta on accident. Beyond that, in the same Mr. One fight, we also see Zoro experience another mystical ability, the Breath of All Things, which allows him to sense the world around him as if by magic. This seems, to most readers, to have been Observation Haki. So it seems as though in the same fight, Zoro may have awakened Advanced Armament and Basic Observation Haki. Now, whether or not this actually was Observation Haki is up for debate, because it's not referenced again like Ryo is in Wano, but it's clear that it is some level of mystical ability that Zoro is tapping into, and since Haki is the only thing like that which exists in One Piece, it's not a stretch to think that Zoro is simply awakening Haki in general at this moment, both armament and observation, subconsciously. Why? Because it's exactly what we were told by Rayleigh. Haki blooms in the heat of battle. The Mr. One fight pushed Zoro to the absolute brink of death, and pushing through that is what allowed Zoro's Haki to awaken for the first time. Now what's interesting is that this is not the last time that Zoro had a Haki bloom pre-Timeskip. Whereas the Mr. One fight had Zoro tap into armament and likely observation Haki, the Kaku fight had Zoro tap into Conqueror's Haki. That's right, Asura is Conqueror's Haki. More specifically, it's advanced Conqueror's Haki, meaning Conqueror's Haki that is used offensively as part of one's attacks. I know this is particularly contentious as a lot of readers especially don't like the fact that Asura is advanced Conqueror's Haki. This is because on the one hand, a lot of Zoro fans don't want to believe that Asura is advanced Conqueror's Haki, as that way they can argue that Zoro was able to scar Kaido before Zoro could even use advanced Conqueror's Haki. On the other hand, a lot of Zoro haters don't want to believe that Asura is advanced Conqueror's Haki because they don't like the idea that Zoro could use such a powerful ability so early in the story. Here's the thing, it doesn't matter what you like or prefer, the text is the text. In the rooftop battle, Oda very explicitly spells out that Luffy and Zoro both end up using advanced Conqueror's Haki against Kaido in chapter 1010. This is not vague in any way, the phrasing is very explicit. We are told that using advanced armament Haki is too shallow to deal significant damage to Kaido. Too shallow is the key repeated phrasing here. Kaido explains that the Scabbard's advanced armament attacks are too shallow to leave a scar like Odin did. And Luffy similarly expresses that advanced armament is too shallow for his punches to deal serious damage to Kaido. This is very, very simple writing, there is literally no room for misinterpretation, it's explicitly identical phrasing. Even the exact words in Japanese are exactly the same. We are meant to understand that the problem with advanced armament attacks against Kaido is that they are too shallow. That changes in chapter 1010 when Zoro finally breaks out Asura and actually deals deep damage and scars Kaido. So finally, Zoro has hit Kaido with an attack that isn't too shallow. And then Luffy also starts hitting Kaido with Conqueror's Haki attacks that we are told are no longer too shallow. This scene is a parallel depiction of attacks that are finally no longer too shallow, as the point is that Luffy and Zoro have progressed from shallow advanced armament attacks to actually effective advanced Conqueror's attacks against Kaido. Zoro's Asura is an advanced Conqueror's Haki attack, just as Luffy is now using advanced Conqueror's Haki attacks. I don't know how much more blatant Oda would need to make this. I mean, Kaido literally comments on Zoro's Conqueror's Haki after Asura. Despite that, I've still seen some people argue that Asura is just really strong advanced armament Haki, and that just makes no sense. The whole point is that Zoro, like the Scabbards, couldn't scar Kaido with advanced armament as it's just too shallow. Oda kept spelling out for us that armament equals shallow. Then when Zoro actually scars Kaido with Asura, Kaido's immediate comment is about Conqueror's Haki. It is genuinely impossible to interpret this scene and think that Asura is Armament Haki, not Conqueror's. I've seen some people say that maybe Asura is Armament and Kaido just magically sensed that Zoro had Conqueror's Haki after this attack anyway, and then randomly decided to comment on it, but that's not a thing. Kaido can't just magically realize someone is a Conqueror's Haki user from their attacks, unless they're actually using Conqueror's Haki infused attacks. Remember, Luffy hit Kaido in Act 1 with a ton of Haki attacks, and Kaido still didn't realize that Luffy was a Conqueror's Haki user. Kaido only realized that Luffy was a Conqueror's Haki user after Luffy subconsciously released Conqueror's Haki to knock out some scrubs. In Zoro's case, Zoro obviously didn't do some general Conqueror's Haki release like Luffy did. All Zoro did was attack Kaido, scar him, and this made Kaido realize that Zoro is a Conqueror's Haki user, meaning that Zoro's attack is what made Kaido have this realization, meaning Zoro very obviously just used a Conqueror's Haki infused attack. I've even heard some people try to do the mental gymnastics to say that Asura is Conqueror's Haki but not Advanced Conqueror's Haki, and that's literally not a thing. By definition, using Conqueror's Haki to power an attack is what Advanced Conqueror's Haki is. Remember, Conqueror's Haki base usage is just a passive release where literally the only thing it does is knock people out, and in some extreme cases exude some force on the environment. As soon as you infuse a physical attack with Conqueror's Haki, it is now Advanced Conqueror's Haki. For instance, someone like Doflamingo can use base Conqueror's Haki release to knock people out, but Doflamingo never reached the advanced level of Conqueror's Haki of learning to infuse his attacks with it. Doflamingo's attacks are just Armament Haki. That was the point of Luffy's entire awakening in chapter 1010. Up till then, Luffy had just used base Conqueror's Haki to knock people out. In 1010, Luffy learned to infuse his attacks with Conqueror's Haki, and that's it. That's what Advanced Conqueror's Haki is. Basically, if you agree that Asura is Conqueror's Haki, then by definition that makes it an Advanced Conqueror's Haki attack. One of the weirder arguments I've seen is some people say that Asura isn't technically an attack, it's just an illusion produced by Zoro subconsciously releasing Conqueror's Haki, which makes no sense since Asura is clearly something Zoro is doing to increase his attack power. One basic unnamed swing of Asura was more powerful than Kaku's strongest attack that cut the entire tower in half. Asura also allowed Zoro to cut the Pacifista, whereas previously he couldn't. Asura allowed Zoro to permanently scar Kaido, whereas before Zoro couldn't. Asura is very clearly not just a visual illusion, it's an extreme boost in physical attack power for Zoro. And as it's clearly implied to be based in Conqueror's Haki, that means by definition it's Advanced Conqueror's Haki, as again, all attacks infused with Conqueror's Haki are, by definition, Advanced Conqueror's Haki. There is literally no way to spin Asura as anything but Advanced Conqueror's Haki. So that leads us to the two big questions. First, considering Asura is Advanced Conqueror's Haki, why then did Zoro have to learn Advanced Conqueror's Haki again from scratch against King? And second, how does it make sense that Zoro was able to awaken all three forms of Haki over the course of so many early pre-Timeskip fights? Well, to begin with, just because Zoro could use Advanced Conqueror's Haki in the form of Asura before the King fight, does not mean that Zoro understood what he was doing, and does not mean that Zoro could even do it on command. It's the same way with Advanced Armament. When Zoro first unlocked Advanced Armament against Mr. 1, Zoro didn't understand what he did, and was left trying to figure out how to do it again. By the end of Pre-Timeskip, Zoro could consistently use Shishi Sansan, but only as a one-off technique. It's not like Zoro had just mastered Armament in general and was regularly using it on all of his attacks, it was just that one technique, Shishi Sansan. And even then, Zoro still likely didn't know what he was actually tapping into whenever he used that. Zoro didn't actually master Armament Haki till he trained with Mihawk. Asura is the same way. Asura is very blatantly Zoro using Advanced Conqueror's Haki. But just because Zoro could pull out one specific Conqueror's Haki technique in battle once in a blue moon, doesn't mean that Zoro actually understood what he was doing or how to use Advanced Conqueror's Haki regularly. That was what the King fight was about, learning to consciously use Advanced Conqueror's Haki. And in the King fight, Zoro was aided by the simple fact that Enma forcibly demands him to keep releasing his Haki till Zoro was forced to get a handle on using Advanced Conqueror's Haki in general. Now, the other major question to address is how Zoro was able to unlock Advanced Armament, Advanced Conquerors, and arguably Basic Observation Haki all pre-Timeskip. Well, it appears that Zoro is just naturally inclined to be able to have Haki blooms anytime he is in a high difficulty battle. If you think of Zoro's progression, every single high or extreme difficulty 1v1 he's had in the story, after East Blue, he's had a Haki bloom. Against Mr. 1, Zoro seemed to awaken Armament and Observation. Against Kaku, Zoro awakened Conqueror's Haki, and against King, Zoro mastered Conqueror's Haki. Literally every other 1v1 Zoro has had was not really anything more than a medium difficulty battle for him, whereas literally any time Zoro has had to fight an opponent that genuinely pushes his limits, Zoro gets a Haki Bloom. In terms of Zoro's high difficulty 1v1s, he is genuinely 3 for 3 in terms of unlocking a Haki Bloom. People talk about how Luffy has kind of left Zoro in the dust in terms of Haki, and that's true, but to be fair, that's more of a consequence of opportunity. Luffy has had the opportunity to get a ton of extremely difficult 1v1s. In the New World alone, Luffy got Doflamingo and Cracker before then finally having his first Haki Bloom against Katakuri, and then Luffy got a ton of attempts against Kaido before getting another Haki Bloom against him. So whereas I do certainly believe Luffy's ceiling in Haki is the highest in the series, I still think it's fair to say that Zoro is clearly the fastest character we've seen at unlocking new levels of Haki, with each extreme difficulty fight Zoro's ever had post-East Blue resulting in a Haki Bloom for him. I also have an additional theory as to why Luffy specifically didn't get Haki Blooms pre-timeskip whereas Zoro did, which I'll expand on in my weekly podcast that you can get by supporting me on Patreon, link in the description below. Now on top of that, Zoro at this moment in time may not be too far from reaching that top tier of Haki. Zoro already has advanced Conqueror's Haki, he just isn't yet at the level of splitting the sky with other advanced Conqueror's Haki users. However, there are two things to consider. First of all, that level may not be too far away, as when Luffy first awakened advanced Conqueror's Haki, he wasn't splitting the sky with Kaido. But after Luffy lost and came back for the next round, this time a bit refreshed and more prepared, Luffy's Conqueror's Haki was now strong enough to split the sky with Kaido. That progression happened very quickly for Luffy, so it's not like there's necessarily a huge gap for Zoro to bridge at the moment, it seems to just take a bit of practice. Second, we've already talked about how Asura is advanced Conqueror's Haki, but Zoro was already seemingly using Asura without even understanding what he was doing. Now that Zoro has mastered how to use advanced Conqueror's Haki from the King fight, it's interesting that he has yet to showcase Asura again. Considering a single use of Asura was enough to scar Kaido, and that was before Zoro could really consciously control Conqueror's Haki, if Zoro with his newfound Conqueror's Haki mastery can actually control Asura and fight entire battles with it, well then that would undoubtedly make Zoro a top tier character. And finally, that brings us to Zoro's one unique trait among all Conqueror's Haki users, which is Asura itself. There is genuinely nothing else like this form in One Piece. We know Asura is a product of Conqueror's Haki, we know it isn't just an illusion as it does add significant power to Zoro's attacks, and Zoro's moves leave 9 slashes instead of 3. Obviously Zoro's not actually growing more heads and limbs made of flesh and blood, but it's clear that Asura is a physical manifestation of Haki that is essentially unprecedented in the story. Now we know that there may be applications of Conqueror's Haki that we have yet to understand. After all, Kaido hints as much in his final words to Luffy, as Kaido implies that Luffy is not yet at Roger's level, despite already being able to infuse his attacks with Conqueror's Haki. And recent displays of Haki techniques by Shanks and Garp do seem to suggest that we still may only be seeing the tip of the iceberg in terms of the full potential of Haki. And that begs the question, is this specific ability of Asura to physically manifest Conqueror's Haki in some sort of transformation the way that Zoro does, is this something that other top tiers can do? Is this a hidden technique of Conqueror's Haki, or is this a unique technique only accidentally developed by Zoro? Because if this is something that only Zoro can do, if it's an entirely new usage of Conqueror's Haki that Zoro has accidentally created to genuinely manifest Haki as a sort of power-up transformation, well then that gives Zoro the potential to go down as one of the most prolific Haki users in One Piece history when all is said and done. So let me know if you agree with Zoro's potential as a Haki user in the comments below, and if you enjoyed this video then definitely like and subscribe. And you can get my extended thoughts on why Luffy didn't get Haki Blooms pre-timeskip on my weekly podcast by supporting me on Patreon, link in the description below. And make sure to get your Surfshark deal for less than $3 a month. Just enter coupon code MORGE for an extra 4 months free at surfshark.deal/morge. Link in the description below or scan the QR code.